Welcome back to STEAM Spot, Think STEAM Career Podcast. Today, we have the privilege of hosting a distinguished guest whose expertise sits at the critical crossroad of literacy and STEAM education. I am thrilled to introduce Dr. Gwendolyn Bartle Lavert, PhD, an international literacy specialist, an international literacy trainer of leaders and educators, writer, researcher, coach, mentor, cognitive mediator, and advocate for transformative education. Dr. Lavert has served as principal of Francis Slocum Elementary School in Marion, Indiana, and as leadership and literacy expert in the Middle East, where she has led curricular improvement and professional development initiative and aligned those efforts with the district progress as professional learner communities. Dr. Lavert has been an educator since 1974 and has experience as a teacher, district literacy specialist, district administrator in various school settings. The schools she has worked in range from predominantly low-income schools serving minorities to some of the most affluent and high-performing schools, including High Park Elementary School in Texarkana, Texas. She has been an assistant professor at the College of Education at Indiana Wesleyan University, where she taught foundation of early literacy and literacy in the content area. She's also taught graduate courses in leadership and led several master's cohort groups. Dr. Lavert is an Indiana Administration Association member and strong belief in developing highly effective school responsive to students' cultural learning and cognitive style has resulted in marked improvement in various schools. She has presented throughout the United States on topics ranging from developing a culture of high expectation to implementing support system for schools who are struggling academically and behaviorally, and she has worked with educational leaders to make curricula more relevant to minority students. Dr. Lavert received a bachelor's degree in elementary education and a master's in literacy from Texas A&M University. Her doctoral in educational leadership is from Indiana State University. Wow. Dr. Lavert strongly believes in the mantra that leaders are readers, championing the cause that every student, irrespective of their background, deserve access to quality literacy education as the foundation for success in life and STEAM field. Today, she is here to share her vision on literacy education and its nexus to STEAM education. Let's welcome Dr. Bartle Lavert to STEAM Spark Think STEAM Career Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Lavert.
Welcome. Thank you. This is a privilege to be here today. I'm very excited about talking about something that I truly love, and that is literacy and making a difference, not only here in the United States, but all over the world.
Thank you so much. You're well accomplished and you have done so much. I love to have been, I would have loved to have been one of your teachers when you were a principal in one of your schools. I will have learned a lot from you.
So much. Thank you so much. I just believe that when I was in first grade and I didn't realize I was having difficulty. I just thought that school started when I left school. That's when school started for me. That's when the spiritual part of me, that's when the human part of me came into place. And through my parents, through my church, through my community, that's where it started. And I always said that when I became a teacher, I said this in first grade, that I wanted to be the best teacher that I could possibly be to make a difference.
Wow. And you continue to make a difference up to today. Thank you. So what's the issue? The issue that inspires tonight's conversation concerns the challenge and the potential disparity in literacy education in underrepresented community, and also the nexus of literacy and STEM education. Dr. Lavert, literacy is a challenge in our community. So if I could start with this conversation, with this question, what is the state of literacy in marginalized community?
Okay. First, let me just give you a definition of literacy.
Okay.
I start off with that literacy is the ability to read, write, speak, think, respond critically, listen in a way that lets us communicate effectively and make sense of the world. So here's the big world out there, and we have to learn how to make sense of the world. Most students, when we look at the big five of education, what is important in reading, we have to look at phonological awareness, we have to look at phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and the fifth one is comprehension. That's the big five. So kids have to go through those 4 hurdles before they can really get into that. We want to start at kindergarten, but to really get into it, they have to understand the critical part of it, the critical thinking, the processing of it, the analyzing of it. And if they don't have these 4 basic ones before they get to the comprehension, pretty much they are lost.
Mhm.
And so when we look at our schools today, especially our low performing children, and believe it or not, we call them marginalized kids because we're looking at African American, Hispanic, low income, we're looking at all of that. But if we go into the suburbs and find some of the kids, African American children or marginalized children who are living in the suburbs, they don't do as well.
Hmm.
As quietly as it may be kept, they still don't do well. So it's an ethnicity thing or an equity gap that's going on, and it follows them whether they stay in the urban schools or whether they go into the suburbs. It's the same thing if it's a ethnic gap, the same thing. But when we look at marginalized children in urban schools, we find that poverty is a major thing that causes this. If I'm looking at my data and it's saying that this comes from the policy circle, it says in the United States, 54% of American adults, 54% of American adults read below the equivalent of a 6th grade level. Lower literacy rates directly correlate to high unemployment rates,
Yes.
reduced income, and a lack of education themselves. There are so many parents who have not gone past 8th grade.
Wow.
So when we look at that's a major problem. Then I'm going to go back and I want to say a quote by Frederick Douglass. He says, once you learn to read, you will be free forever.
Mhm.
So if these are the equivalents of why they're not doing well, higher unemployment, reduced income, all of those, then how can they catch up? If their parents are
Good
in
question.
this, how can their children
Mm.
move without a lot of intensive intervention? How can their children move? Now, there was something else I wanted to tell you that in high school, let's see, it says here that 16% of African American youth are proficient in reading by the time they reach high school. Now, they always say proficient, like 16% is really good.
16% is very low.
we look at it, that means that 94% of high school kids who reach high school are not reading at grade level proficiency. 94%.
Quite a lot.
So that's a lot that's going on. And so if you look at our definition somewhere down the line, reading, writing, so they're probably reading and writing, but not at the proficient level, 94%. But then we move into that thinking, responding critically, communicating effectively, writing effectively. All of those things impact how successful they're going to be. So by 8th grade, let's think, by 8th grade, if we look at the data and see where they are, then what needs to happen from 8th grade through 12th grade? Because they're not getting any of those advanced classes because they can't read.
Yes. All right.
That I've talked about in my definition falls under math, science, social studies, all of those areas. Reading falls under it. Because if they're still having problems when I think about reading, I think research is very important. So when I think about reading, I'm thinking about they can look carefully at words, and within words, they can look at beginnings and endings. They can look at small words and big words. They look for parts that they know, thinking of other words which are similar. So that's called decentration. They're holding all of these different things in their brain. So if they haven't been taught how the brain reads, and they're lost right there. They're looking at rote and memorization. So between kindergarten and 8th grade, this is what's happening to them. Think about what makes sense for word choice and meaning to the text as a whole. So they're looking at the words, but they're looking at the words within the text and understanding the meaning of those words, and then moving on to try to figure out what is the author really saying to me. Think what kind of word might fit in the text, and if it sounds right, they must do it all simultaneously. If there's some defects between phonological awareness, phonics, and words and fluency means that you're going to be moving automatically through a text. So right at that point, they're already lost.
Wow. Wow. So here is the challenge. You mentioned something about the parents earlier. The parents are not as literate. So what are we to do? Where do we begin? If the parents are not literate to be able to help, and the schools are underfunded, so where do we go from here? You really have said a lot about the impact of literacy to the ability to function or to succeed in terms of jobs, at least good paying jobs. So what do we do?
Let me just tell you this. Of adults with low literacy,
Yes.
10% of them receive support services, such as adult literacy programs. 10%. So if they're not going to these services, they are just in. I had a parent last year, I worked as an interventionist in a school because I'm writing my new book called Who Says I Can't? A 4-year plan to close the gap before 4th grade. That's my new book that's coming out with Solution Tree Publishing.
Congratulations. Congrats.
And so in that book, I talk about, I think storytelling is so important, but girl came to school in 4th grade. She had spent 2nd and 3rd grade at home. Her parents were in low-paying jobs. They could not have one job. The mom had 3 jobs. She did DoorDash, she did the pizza place, and then there was another one that she did. So she was never at home. So this was during the pandemic. So she was at home by herself. No one was there. Grandma lived there. Grandpa lived there. They were all out working. The father, when he came home, he had to go to sleep so he could get up the next day. And then the mom came home and slept. And then she went to the 3 jobs. The father had 3 jobs. So now, when would they have time to go to those support services. And there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 kids in the house. This is one family. All of them live in the same house. Her mother's sister lived there, and their 2 brothers lived there. The grandmother, the grandfather, the husband or boyfriend, and then the sister had a boyfriend that was in and out, and she was pregnant. Out of that 10% that are going, we have what, 90% that are not going. So what do we do about it? I think one of the things is that, and what I did in my last low performing school as principal, I had sessions for parents to come to. I've spent 80, as a principal, I spent 80% of my time in classrooms or working with parents. Now, in order for a principal to do that, you have to have a strong front office staff, a secretary who is par excellent, where you can spend 80% of your time out in the classrooms, then talking with parents, afternoons training parents, going to the local Y, going to the Boys and Girls Clubs. I was able to stop the kids from just going to the Boys and Girls Club and just play. Parents who were going in there to help, we also helped them with their work. One of the things that bothered my parents was the fact that they hated going into the classrooms to talk with the teachers. So when we had PTO meetings, we didn't go into the classrooms anymore. They said, one parent said, it just reminds me of the time I was in the classroom and I was not successful. Mm-hmm. So we did everything outside, or we did it in the hallways. We did not go into the classroom. Because I did surveys to figure out, okay, so what is it that's causing these parents not to come? And then, this may be terrible, but I said I had a partnership with the Westland Church, and they gave turkeys away every Thanksgiving. And sometimes they were giving 2 and 3 turkeys away, hoping to get the parents there. And we found out that they were only coming to get the turkeys. There were about 4 other places in town that was giving turkeys also.
Wow.
Persuaded them to stop giving the turkeys and have different kinds of activities that would force the parents and the kids to work together. We had one mom who learned how to read through her child. She couldn't go to the grocery store, but every afternoon when her first grader got home, she helped her with her reading. Everything she learned, then her mom learned the same thing. So there are ways that we can look to see what's happening and intervene, and also make them feel comfortable. Like, it's not your fault. Sometimes I think 90% of the instruction is at a level that is too fast for kids to grasp it. And so they don't understand the system. If it was back in the day, it was mostly rote and memorization and Jack and Janet books with characters that didn't look like them. So that's the problem. So just a few things that we did to help bring parents in.
Okay, I also remember when I was teaching in middle school, those are some of the strategies that we utilized to bring the parents into the building. As a matter of fact, a lot of our parents, English is not their first language. So there are also parents who are immigrant to the United States. So we often have session with them in the cafeteria instead of the classroom. But the biggest problem, that was when I was teaching middle school, that was when the No Child Left Behind was pretty big, and there was a lot of money back then. But now I often wonder, is there money somewhere to help, especially with after school program for similar programs such as that, to be able to help parents, especially the parents who, immigrants themselves, and of course English is not their first language. Do you know if there is enough money to go around to different schools? Is that part of the equity issue, the lack of resources with marginalized community?
I think, let me tell you another thing that's really great. My brother-in-law is a pastor of a church in Indiana,
Okay.
and for 40 years. From the church budget, he started an after school reading program, and it moved over into the summer, and the church funded that.
Okay.
And so that's after school program and summer program led to a charter school.
Mm.
And that charter school was a public charter school. So I was the founder and wrote the proposal for it, and I became the curriculum director. My sister became the school leader.
Okay.
And we got funding from the state because it was a charter school, but a public charter school.
Mm.
And hundreds of thousands of dollars for that.
Mm.
Understand now, the church that I go to now, they have a program, but
Okay.
they several thousands of members.
Mm.
And that is a vision of the pastor to have that school there. So there can be monies now from the state. I
Mm.
notice now that more money is coming out. Now, there was a principal, a superintendent, who had many times when the money comes through, the superintendents have to have the vision for that. And then they can provide extra help for kids outside of in the community to
Okay.
bring that. But there was a superintendent that my sister and I knew, and the State Department was going to give close to $1 million, but
Mm.
they had to be connected to an elementary school.
Okay. Okay.
And I hate to say this because it's sad. That's why I'm not saying where it's from.
Mm.
When they went to the superintendent with the proposal, he said, not at this time.
Why?
He just said, we're just going to wait maybe another time. And he knew the urgency of it. So whomever is doing this must feel the urgency to want to do something. Now you're a superintendent of a low socioeconomic community. And when someone comes to you and say, is it possible if we could use one of your schools to house the tutoring? And they say, maybe another time.
Mm.
My girlfriend has in Virginia, Dr. Wesley is the pastor of her church. And she started, along with me helping her, she started an after school program. But they give millions of dollars to HBCUs. The president of the HBCU comes to Virginia,
Mm.
and they give millions of dollars all the time. But like I said, people have to have hearts for it in order for because
So there is money, there is resources out there. So it's all about the vision, the passion, the desire for leadership actually to move the needle, to help. So that actually, I wanted to change the subject a little, then we're going to come back to this. So how does early literacy development, I want to go back to this. How does early literacy development impact students' ability to engage with and succeed in STEAM subject? Can you provide some example of how foundational literacy skills help students understand complex STEAM concept? You mentioned comprehension, critical thinking, paying attention, recognizing text patterns. That is critical in STEAM, right? In STEM, right?
yes.
Do you want to, so how does that not having all those basic foundational skills, how does that or will that impact?
So the National Reading Panel came out several years ago with this hierarchy of reading skills. And now we're into the era of the science of reading. And we're saying that kids are not doing well. One of the reasons that many kids are not doing well or what they need is systematic, explicit instruction of literacy. So it has to be systematic. And it has to be so systemic that kids are learning as they move through the process. So the first stage is phonological awareness. And I think that I said, look carefully at words and within words and look at the beginnings and endings, look at small words and big words, look for parts that they know, thinking of other words which are similar, think about what makes sense for word choice and meaning to the text as a whole. So if you look at the first part, they've got to hear, not just see the letters, but they've got to hear the sounds. And so you're building an auditory pathway, because we know that the reading was not built into the brain. Kids are able to learn on their own when from birth on, they learn through looking and listening. But when we move into phonological awareness and this auditory sounds, that has to be explicitly and systematically taught. They just don't catch it. So when kids come to school and the teacher has not gone through this process, let me show you this part. The brain is not hardwired for reading. The natural connection needed for reading must be built through successful instructional practices. So what is that saying? A little boy that I tutor now, in first grade, he had 4 first grade teachers in 1 year, 4 teachers. The first teacher got really sick, so she left, and they got another teacher who was experienced. She stayed there a few months and got another job. They promoted her. Then another teacher came, and she stayed until that first teacher, who they never saw, came back and kept them for the rest of the year. So she came back a few months before the end of the school year. So he's had 4 teachers. And so we go back and say the brain is not hardwired for reading. The neural connections needed for reading must be built through successful instructional experiences. Mm-hmm. And if that does not happen, because when the cognitive skill to rewire the brain is that rapid auditory processing at the speed of sight. I need to be able to look into words and see small words, see big words, but see small words, see patterns. The brain looks for patterns all of the time. So that must be seen. Now, when we look at phonological awareness, they have to hear it. It has to be built in. So awareness of gross differences in words. I see a cat. How many words did you hear? I see a cat. 4 words. Put your finger on the dot that would be cat. Instead of cat, give me another word. I see a dog. I see a rat. And then awareness of rhyme. Right. Jack Hill went up the hill, and then segmentation, starting off with compound words. Then we go into seeing it. So we finished with the hearing. Then we move into seeing it. So awareness of initial consonants, those that can be strung out, like those can be strung out. And alliteration, baby Bob sat on the bed. Baby Bob. So they're hearing the alliteration, awareness that 2 words begins with the same sound. And then we move into that last part there, awareness of segmentation of onset and rhyme. Means that there are 37 rhymes that makes up 500 words. So if I know cat and it has the rhyme at, then I know bat and sat and rat. So then we move into the sight words. So by this stage, by December, if we've covered level 1 and level 2, our kids are reading decodable text. Yes. So if they miss out on all of that, they are lost. And it's not in a systematic process. Teachers are moving from whole group to small groups. And we call it tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, one-on-one. And if a child is slow in this area, then the teacher, they need to have at least 2 reading sessions. 2 reading sessions a day where that teacher is going over these things that I just talked with you about. Then finally, this is the most complex, which is phonemic awareness. the manipulation of sounds. They are able to segment, pull words apart, and put them back together. For example, if I say hat, hat, and I want you to make hit, in your mind, you've got to take the out and put the in there. Does that make sense? You're manipulating the sound. So if I have mat and I want you to make hat, in my mind has to become consciously aware, awakening the minds of your kids in order to do this, because you're moving in and out and the brain is helping you move in and out. But if kids miss out on this, then they're lost.
Yeah, I can see that.
That they're totally lost. And so then these are the 37 rhymes that make up 500 words. And then these are the 100 sight words. Some can be sounded out and some cannot, but they have to know these at the speed of sight. Wow. And then from there, we move into the lesson plan. So this is a lesson plan that the teacher would have to take them through. They've got to read it, reread it, discuss, react to it, and then they move into the coding it, applying it again, and then how do we transfer this into books? So we get them into books right away. So this is the first step that many of our kids miss out on. And all of this should be mastered by the end of first grade.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
That's why these foundational skills are so important for our kids.
And the challenge for the marginalized group, as you have mentioned, is number one, parents, the school, the access to having adequate experienced teachers,
yes,
or dedicated teachers,
yes,
is one of the major challenge. Are there other challenges that causes this kind of interruption? Or
the major thing is professional development.
okay.
We've
So
had.
are you saying that some of the teachers are not skilled enough to be able to, or are you also saying that bringing the students to fluency, it's not just the work of the literacy or the language teachers, it's
the work of everybody.
Everybody.
Okay. Everybody. I worked as a district literacy specialist, and the superintendent was a literacy specialist.
Okay.
And the superintendent said, everybody here will be a teacher of reading. So we had everybody from the 4-year-old program up to the high school coaches. And I remember one coach saying, I've never liked reading. I know how to read. Now I was a little confused because he was a football coach and he had to help his quarterback understand the plays. Is that right? The quarterback is the person who runs the team, and he has to know the plays. And if he doesn't know how to know the plays, he's fired.
Absolutely.
So he said, but he wasn't looking at what he was doing was a part of reading, making the right decisions, critical thinking at the speed of sight. The back couldn't say, I want you to go over there. And all of a sudden he's standing up there looking, and the boys are waiting for him to tell them where to go, and he has no idea. But the main point is that we've got to train teachers, and we have to have an instructional leader who understands literacy and spend at least 80%, I would say 70 to 80% of the time going into classrooms and being able to analyze what the teacher is doing, is or is not doing. Yeah. So number one, professional development. And they'll say, many of them will say, I have plenty of professional development. But then I've come to say, that professional development did nothing for me. So what I did was I developed a survey, and all the things for our diagnostic tests, they cover these 5 stages, this hierarchy. If you're doing I ready or I read diagnostic tests, which most districts are doing, then they cover all of these. And then they have an analysis of where kids fall within this frame. And so when you look at the data, have data walks with your teachers, then you say, these are the skills that's keeping our kids from moving towards proficiency. These are the skills that put our kids in the yellow. These are skills and strategies that put our kids in the red. And if this is going on, then you have a differentiated professional development. So I had a schedule that said, on Monday, we're going to train on this. On Friday, or Wednesday, we're going to train on this. If you feel that you are proficient in these areas, then there's no need for you to come, but we will be coming to your classroom to observe it.
Good. One of the challenge that I think for some teachers that are not language teachers, especially in STEM, they actually may say, I have to teach my discipline. For me to try to integrate the literacy skills into my curriculum, that is going to cause me not to be at pace.
Mhm.
So I can see that, being that I'm a STEAM educator and I know my people. So I think that is so. How do we, how have you been able to handle that? Or maybe I should ask this question in a different way. So considering the technical language used in STEAM, and because that it will be the argument, they'll say STEAM, I have to teach my discipline because of the technical aspect of it. So what advice or how will you recommend or how have you helped the teachers in this team to effectively integrate literacy into their curriculum, ensuring that students excel even in the technical subjects?
Okay. Number one, they can't move to the technical until they have an understanding of the hierarchy of reading skills. Okay.
Okay.
So number one, data runs everything that you do. So if the kids have taken a diagnostic test,
Hmm.
like I said, the two most popular ones are NWEA MAP, MAP, or it's the iReady test.
Yes.
Okay. So if they're doing one of those, they will have it all mapped out for the teachers, showing what they are proficient in, what they're not proficient in. Number one is to make sure that the teachers have an understanding of the strategies, how to teach those strategies. So that's one professional development on strategies. Number two is differentiated instruction. We can no longer say we have a one size fit all.
Sure.
Because if you have a class and over 90% of them are on different levels, you
Yes.
cannot teach to the whole class.
Yes.
You may give an introduction to whatever theme you're introducing, but you cannot teach because you're going to have so many kids in the classroom that are not listening to anything you're saying because number one, they don't understand it or they're too high.
Yes.
So what you want to do is differentiate the classroom, and you may have project-based activities. You may have performance type activities. So kids are doing different things according to the theme. And then I had my teachers over the years I had a college for knowledge table. And at the college for knowledge table, that's the table that I would call them back, different ones back to the table. And I would provide tier one, which is at their target, teaching those skills that's at their targeted level. So I may have, let's say I'm teaching a 7th grade class and I have 20 kids in that class. 15 of them are not reading at grade level. So even if I started off teaching it to everyone, if we have an I call it intellectual dialogue, I'm only going to have 5 kids that's going to interact with me. But if I put those 5 kids at their level to do different project-based activities, all kinds of things. And then I can divide the others up in different things and then pull that the lowest of lowest. And from that, if it's a 7th grade classroom, I can teach these skills that I have here: phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension from their book, and just say, pull out, because they've been in school all these years. I'll say, okay, so let's look at the first page. Circle all the words that you know. And then I take out those words that they don't know, and we'll do phonics activities. There's 6 basic phonics strategies that you can teach. Patterns, closed vowel patterns, silent E patterns, and then I can go into expanding the words by teaching prefixes, suffixes, all of those from the words that's in their passage. And I tell you, in 4 weeks, I'll have them reading at grade level, because they're not reading books that's at their level, but we're extracting those things that's not at their grade level, and we're breaking them down. As I said earlier, we're looking at small words and big words. So nobody may have ever told them basket. Bass has a CVC pattern. So we know ass, and ket, K-E-T, has a consonant, vowel, consonant pattern. So you look at that whole word and you look inside of it, deep inside of it, and you see the pattern, and you pull it apart, segment, and then you blend it, basket. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
If I did that every single day that they came to me, in 4 weeks, they would move to a 7th grade, because I'm very intentional about doing it.
Yes.
I'm not embarrassing them. I'm making them feel good about what they're doing, and I'm giving them a systematic, explicit instructional practice that they can use every single day.
Excellent. That is pretty good. So, considering the importance of early literacy, what strategy can you recommend to be employed in the preschool and kindergarten to lay a strong foundation for later STEAM learning?
What I'm showing you now is this hierarchy of reading skills.
Okay, so even with the parents,
because you've got to show parents how to build that auditory system. Because if it's not built, they will not be able to hear the sounds of language.
Yeah. So can you share, just so that parents really have a good understanding of why this is so important. Literacy is important, and not parents only. I shouldn't say parents only, but educators. How can literacy proficiency influence students' ability to pursue higher education and career in STEM field?
Number 1, remember I said the rewiring of the brain?
Right.
That brain is not hardwired for reading. And if no one ever shows them or wire the brain, they'll never be able to read proficiently. So therefore, they can't get jobs other than a McDonald's.
Yeah.
So in my last presentation, the kids said, I won't ever have to read. I can go to McDonald's. And I said, but if you go to McDonald's, and we looked at how much they would make there, I said, you would have to have 3 or 4 jobs. Whereas if you knew how to read, you can go on to college, get a degree, and become an engineer. Many engineers make $100,000 a year. And look at what you can do. So my point is that they can't get past this. They can't get past the rewiring of the brain, the auditory part. They've got to hear the sounds. And when they look at a word, they're not looking at letters, they're looking at sounds. They're looking at patterns in words. And then when we extend it, they've got to be looking at prefixes, suffixes, root words, contractions, but that has to be systematically taught.
Yeah, I know, and I get it. And that brings me back to, because me thinking as a STEM teacher, I'm just thinking with everything that I know, everything you have said is so important. But it seems when you a STEAM teacher then can always look at this as that's a lot of work for me to do. I expect by the time they get to me, that at least they will have got this basic foundational skills.
Mhm.
But that means that now I will have to start really spend a lot of my time teaching them all this basic cognitive skills. And I
Yes.
just don't have the time to do that.
Mhm.
Is there some other shortcut strategy that teachers can integrate? Let me put it this way, is it really doable? I mean, do you think that STEAM teachers can be able to do this within their curriculum, integrate these basic skills into their curriculum and still achieve their own goals or standards as required by the school system?
I'm smiling because I was just talking a few months ago with a high school group, and the
Yes.
principal was telling me the same thing that the teachers were saying. It's just too much to ask for. They'll never be able to learn it. We just don't have time. But if a teacher, as I said, 20 kids, let's say you have only 5 kids that can do it, you would rather just look over the others and just teach to those 5 kids when you know. Oh, is that humane? That's the question I always ask. Is that humane when you know these kids are here and that you have a clear understanding of how this works, this hierarchy of reading skills work, and we've given you all the training, you still don't think that you could do it for humanity? And that's the question I ask you. Now, another thing the principal and I talked about was that if out of those 20, out of those 20 kids in the classroom, 5 she could differentiate, then she could have a group, but then there would be another teacher that could pull those kids out and do the hierarchy of reading skills.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then they could come back in. So they'll be flowing back
I
in and
like
out, flowing back in and out.
I like that. I
I
think
can't hear you.
I believe I said I like that one. Having two teachers within the classroom,
Yes.
co-teachers,
Yes.
right? I think that will work,
Yeah.
right?
And here's the thing. If you have, and you're really trying to move the kids, let's say you have, let's say 25 kids again, that teacher who is saying, I just can't do it, she takes the 5 that she can move on with, and then I'll get 2 master literacy specialists, divide them up again, and then they would teach the hierarchy and then move them into that grade level.
Hmm.
And so they would have, let's see, August, September, October, November, December. They would have 5 months to have an intensive reading program
Hmm.
that would move them. The last part of it, they would all come back in where that teacher would teach, and then they could stay in there to help support.
Hmm. You say if you were to have a program in a school system, how long
Yes.
do you think will it take for you to be able to help teachers close the gaps?
I
Yeah.
just finished doing it at Francis Locum. It took us 1 year.
Okay.
And also I helped there were, let's say, 5 elementary schools. So
Okay.
I was a school principal, and I also was a consultant who helped the curriculum director map it out. And while I was at my school working, she was pushed into the other schools to help them.
So
One,
will you say that the emphasis then shall always be more in the elementary schools?
oh
Uh,
no, no.
okay.
It should be in the middle schools because we moved to the middle school, and I think it should be in high school because my last school I just helped with last 2 years ago. I
Okay.
worked at a high school to try to pull them out
Hmm.
and them. But the
Hmm.
thing about it is, but this could all be eliminated if we helped our first grade teachers understand this hierarchy and they
Hmm.
took them through it. If they were finished with phonics by first grade
Yes.
and second grade, they're working on expanding words with prefixes and suffixes. there would not be a third grade gap.
Hmm. Hmm.
But
But
now,
this-
I'm sorry,
Go ahead, please go ahead.
now we have to catch up.
Yes,
But we have to have teachers of like mind. We
yes,
have to have teachers who understand the human value and help kids see who they are. Because in I put in my book that everybody needs to have some place to hang their hat on.
yes.
And literacy has culture to hang its hat on.
Hmm.
So if you can tell kids who they are, how they got here, all those things about them, help them. The social structure and the governance structure is who are they within their culture.
Hmm.
And then the social structure is who they are within the cultures of everybody else. And from that, you can teach literacy.
Hmm.
But you always have to have something to hang your hat on.
No, I
And
like that.
now, it by itself is not, the hierarchy of reading skills by itself is not going to do it. So that's why I always say the science of reading plus. Because
Is that what you were doing in this video? Can you stop sharing? Let me share.
yeah,
I thought you sent me a video of whereby you were. So let me see. Okay, right here. Right here.
Represent Dr. G. Author B. Author a storyteller writing workshops. Your children cannot miss
as an author going into schools,
K10 Lavert Lavert at Gmail.
that was in K through 6th grade school. And this is a writer's workshop.
Okay.
That's a parent that I was talking with and helping with some things. That's me going into, I think that was 1st grade classroom as an author. And I was reading Papa's Mark and The Barber's Cutting Edge.
Wow. Wow. I was just wondering, I just saw there was a clip whereby you were, yeah, right here, you were dressed in a character. So I was wondering if you're trying to meet them right where they are. So
Well, the thing about it is the librarians called me in, and that's that cultural piece.
okay.
Let them see other people and where they live and where they've come from and make connections and with life. So that reading aloud to kids and having those major discussions about different things, all of that falls under that hierarchy of reading skills.
Wow. Wow. There's also another video of you where you were, let me see. Let me minimize that if I can. I think, is it this one here or was it, I think, let me try this one.
We need a transformation in the spirit and human values that undergird education of all children.
That's it. Just think about literacy. STEM needs a hook to hang on to. And what is it that STEM needs? It needs literacy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
if kids, everybody wants to hang their hats on.
Hmm.
And so literacy, STEM needs literacy because they can't do it without it. Can I tell you another quick story?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, please.
There's a friend of mine. He's a doctor, medical doctor. He grew up in a small impoverished town in Indiana, and he was adopted by a Black family in Indiana. And his mother was white. He never knew. He was just adopted, but he found all this information out later on. But he just stayed in the library. But he loved science and math. He loved all of that. And when he was at middle school, he decided that he wanted to become a medical doctor.
Wow.
But he didn't know anyone that was a medical doctor, and he didn't know how he was going to get to college or anything. Keep in mind, it's a very poor community.
Right.
My mother-in-law moved there and got to know him. And my sister and my brother-in-law adopted him. He just stayed at their house all the time. And so she said, and I can call his name Dr. Jeff Breckenridge. And Jeff said, my brother-in-law went to him and said, "You're going to college and we're going to help you get there."
Wow.
And he went to the same college that my brother-in-law went to. He said when he got to medical school, he said he knew how to read, but that deep processing that there's
What's missing?
wanted, he was having difficulty with it.
Yeah.
Until he met one doctor, one professor, and he told them, he explained the process: systematic, explicit instruction. And he said, "I want you guys to do," he went step by step by step, what he wanted them to do. And they all got together, each team got together, and they had these discussions about what they needed to do. He said that totally changed his life.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because for him, reading was more about the skills, not the process.
Hmm.
And when you talk about intellectual dialogues and critical thinking, you open up the brain, you awaken the minds. His mind was awakened so that he could process. And he's one of the best medical doctors in the state of Indiana.
Wow. Wow. So I'm glad that you shared that story. So with that inspiration, what training and resources do you think STEAM teachers need to effectively support literacy development within their subject area? Another way of putting it, how can literacy educators be better prepared to incorporate in, or how can STEAM teachers be better prepared incorporating literacy into their curriculum?
Well, when we think about literacy, it's learning to read.
Okay.
And reading to learn is the part that kids should come into that classroom with. They should be able to have intellectual dialogues. They should be able to.
Yeah, but we know, Dr. Lavert, that some of them they're lacking.
Well, that's the thing. That's where they should be. But going back to what I talked about earlier, the
Yes.
training has to be. I think everyone who is a STEM teacher should be trained in literacy, the science of reading plus. They have to be trained, because if they're not, if those big five that I talked with you about, where on that pendulum do they think that they need to be or have more training in, should be maybe a survey, turned into a survey, and they tell you where their areas of strengths are and where they are not doing well. Let me tell you another quick story. I
Yes.
have, after I looked at my data where we moved from, it was nearly an F, a DF school to a B, I looked and said, because my goal was to move our school to an A. For 10 years, it had been an F school or a B school. I come in 1 year and say, I want an A school. Then I had to, again, look at the data. So they have to be data driven. You've got to be able to take
Identify.
the data and identify those targets.
Yeah.
And then under those targets, you have to figure out what is the best way. John Hattie has a book called Visible Literacy, and he talks about the strategies that should be taught and should not be taught. So you're writing down all the strategies that you've been teaching, but really they have not worked. They're not a part of the science of reading. So I looked at my data and found out that if my writing class, my language class, had moved up to 140 points, and they could have with good instruction, because this teacher had all of the best kids in the class. They were making 90s on their test and all this stuff. She had the best kids. But when I looked at the test scores, they were like between 80 and 90 when I needed 140 points. But after going into that classroom, watching her teaching, and I realized that it was her and her understanding of writing and language. So I started a whole 6 weeks writing course. I put her in it and about 3 other teachers. We taught a course in writing. And then once she learned a certain thing, we went and observed it and gave feedback. intellectually, she couldn't get it.
Hmm.
She just could not understand the process of writing. And then I found out through feedback that she didn't like writing. She was not a good writer in school. She just barely got through it. And she was there teaching my 5th grade students and not being effective. So the person who is observing and evaluating has to do some progress monitoring. That's what we did. We did progress monitoring. We did a 3-week period, and then we watched. We called her in for feedback, and then we watched her again. And then we did a test, and then we did it again. We did it for the entire time of the course. At the end of the year, I decided that she just could not do it. Mentally, she could not teach that class. So I had to move her to another school. And to this day, she is in a special ed classroom where she was in a whole class, not actually liking it and not being effective in her teaching. But I had to go through that whole process to finally get her to that point of saying, I can't do it. A writing class, progress monitoring, classroom observation, modeling, all that stuff was done.
But if you were to take teachers through that, the teachers will feel a little bit overwhelmed, and they may feel like they're under some kind of intervention.
Well,
Right?
but my question to you then, what
Yes.
else can you do when you know that you don't want, and their jobs are not at stake because we're giving them every opportunity to improve.
Mhm.
So you have to want to do it. I think that's a part of the problem, holding people accountable for a
Yes.
job that they have signed on to do.
Mhm.
And so you're giving them every opportunity. You pick and choose the courses that you want. If you feel that this is not the class for you, let me know. And then I'll find another place for you so we can get someone in here who really wants to do it. How else can we do it? And you can't do it. You can't make the change in a year if teachers are not open for feedback
Absolutely.
and
So,
dialogue.
yeah, you're right.
What else?
So go ahead. Go ahead. Finish your talk.
And what else can you do if it's about children that you want to move?
Yeah.
And then you go back and look at where they have been, like in our 3rd grade classroom. Some of them had 2 or 3 different teachers in one year. So there was not consistency in the instruction. And now here they are in 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and those grades determine the grade that school will have. What can you do? You can't move a school in a year, even if you said 1 to 3 year period, longitudinal data. You still have to do a lot of training from the teachers. You've got to train the parents, and then you've got to go in there and train the students, but you have to have proficient people training them. You've got to have parents who feel comfortable in doing what they do at home, and you've got to have teachers who are proficient.
I'm glad that you mentioned parents because we're getting to the end of this. So some of the few questions that I have, 2 of them deals with parents, and then one policy and policy makers. And then the other one is assessment and evaluation. And I think you've touched upon assessment and evaluation a little bit. So in terms of parents' involvement and support, how can parents be educated and encouraged to support literacy and STEAM learning at home, particularly in community where parents might have limited educational background?
I think we've talked a little bit about that, but the main thing is to call them in and give them examples, take them through a process.
So before even the parents, so will you suggest that the school system should do a survey like we used to do when I was in middle school? Take a survey to see where the parents are, and then before parents do anything, at least have a good understanding where the parents are,
Yes.
right? Okay, okay.
That's very important.
Okay.
Or if you can't get them to do that, just let them all come and in your introduction, tell them what needs to happen.
Okay.
One of the things that I did do because I couldn't get the parents there, I had a bus,
Hmm.
to go to their homes and pick them up.
Wow. Wow.
I go to every level that I can to make sure that they feel comfortable, that they want to come. And when they do come, the kids are helping them. And then I have some adults who are helping them. All that is going on so that when they go home, they feel comfortable in doing it. And also we recorded some areas that we were working in. The
Hmm.
principal and I, when I worked with the school last year, I flew to Indianapolis and the principal and I made recordings and so that the parents said, this is what you're working with your child on today. This is the example. And we just did it right there in front of them so they could see it. And they could play it back and forth as many times as they want to.
Did you do it by grade level or did you do it as a by
Mm-hmm.
grade levels? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. That is thinking outside the box. Talk to me about the budget. You mentioned something about picking them up. That must have been quite
Well,
expensive.
it was a Title I school.
Okay. Okay.
So,
There's
and
money.
at
There's
East
money.
Funds, we could do this. But let me tell you, the partnership between the Westland Church,
Okay.
remember there was a partnership there? They had
Yeah.
plenty of money.
Um, can you say that again?
The Westland Church
Yes.
had plenty of money.
A lot of money.
A lot of money.
Wow.
And
So a partnership between,
that's what we had.
the school system and the private organization or
Yes,
nonprofit organization is
yes,
a must.
yes.
Very good. I like that. I like that.
So I had partners to come in. All the kids that were at the bottom 25%, they had partners and they would come in weekly to work with them. And literacy
Hmm.
was one of the things they had to work with because they came in before I came in. They just did games and things like that. But they had to do sight word flips. They had to do words. They had to do everything and they were trained to do it.
Hmm. So let me ask you a question. Critical thinking actually is very important in STEAM,
Yes.
and particularly in science, pattern recognition, knowing how to read the data, it's extremely very important. Being able to be analytical is extremely important. What will you say the emphasis should be for teachers? Because we've seen a lot of our students also struggle with that. Where should the emphasis be? And knowing that some of our students are already lacking in some certain basic skills, because remember what I mentioned to you earlier, one of the biggest challenge is pacing. And then the other challenge is the teachers may feel, I just don't have the time. Really, I need to cover my own material. I don't have the time. So to assist these teachers out, because I heard you mention that identify where you think that you're strong at and then focus on that. So
Mhm.
what will be your recommendation in regards to that? If these are some of the challenge or pushback that one may have.
One of the things I felt that made a difference is that when you talk with teachers and you show them the data
Mhm.
and then you say, okay, so where do you think you fit
Mhm.
into this? Because you have to go into that part of it. Where do you think you fit into this? You say, I've got to do my things. How can I go back and do this? When you only have 5 kids that you can do your thing with, what do you think that you can do with these children, these other 15 children who are just left there? They're being
Mhm.
left behind. But here's our data sheet. And here are the things that they need to be working on. Will you take this with you? And I met with them weekly, one-on-one weekly,
Mhm.
and once a month with their grade level. And I said, okay, so I want you to take this chart home with you and look at your children, the 15 who are not, they're saying that these kids are not part of what we do, what I do. But yet but the district is saying they are a part of what
You do, right?
can you tell me when you come back at our next meeting, I want you to think through this and tell me, based on this data, what skills you think you could work on. And when you come back the next week, then we're going to talk about how we can arrange your classroom in a way that you can teach these kids based on this data.
Yeah.
Because
So,
it comes down to making decisions
yeah.
about where you want to be. If you're saying you've got 25, the district has said, the school has said, you've got 25 kids and only 5 of them are at your grade level, but yet you have to teach all
All
20.
of them. Right.
But
Mm.
you're refusing to do this because you're saying, I haven't been trained to do it. And I'm offering you training. I'm offering you coaching. I'm offering you mentoring.
Mm.
I'm offering you someone to come and model for you. I'm offering you a class. That's 5 things that I'm offering you
Yeah.
to help you get better.
Yeah. The more I speak to you, the more I see the urgency of collaboration between, especially the English language teachers and the STEM teachers. It's of paramount
Yes.
that there needs to be, and now I do also see the importance of the STEAM, the arts in the STEM.
May I say
Uh,
something about critical thinking? I
yes.
didn't say anything about critical thinking starts in early grades when reciprocal teaching is a skill
Yes.
that talks about the teacher reads aloud starting off the first 15 minutes. I would say 10 or 15 minutes of the class. In any class,
Yes.
you're reading aloud.
Mm.
And then you have to have them to predict, clarify,
Yes.
summarize, find the main idea, and I think it's cause and effect. But there are 5 strategies. And every day I had a calendar, and this was for a 7th grade classroom. Every day I modeled, and they said, Dr. Lavert, are you not going to do the read aloud and have discussions?
Wow. So they've
And
got so used to it.
because you're consistent, you know,
Right.
if you did it one day and then the next day you don't do it, the next day, everything you have to do is consistent. And I said, okay, so in the next 20 days, you're going to have intellectual dialoguing with me, and you're going to be able to do it now in small groups after those days. And every day I found a book called Just Juice. And Just Juice was about a little girl. This is the 3rd grade classroom. She was failed in 3rd grade. And I said a prayer. I said, Lord, I need a book that's going to turn these kids all the way around, because 3/4 of them were not reading at grade level.
Hmm.
And that was the 3rd grade classroom that we had to have 100% mastery for the
Yeah.
state. So I went to the library, and all of a sudden this book fell.
Hmm.
It was like it was falling into my lap. It was a gift. And the father said in the book, sometimes I feel like a chained dog.
Hmm.
Because he couldn't keep a job. He argued all the time. All this was because he couldn't read. He couldn't work with his teammates because he didn't want them to find out that he could
I
not.
couldn't read. Do we
All
see that behavior also in the classroom? Absolutely.
out behavior, act out all the time. He did all this, but he was a grown man. And so we were able to talk. We were talking about, what did the writer mean
Hmm.
when she said, sometimes I feel like a
Like a
chain.
chained dog. Hmm.
And I said, do you know anything that anyone you have or anyone in your family
Oh,
has?
bringing it back to them.
That's that
Wow.
cultural part. That
Right.
feel like a chained dog. You know what little one boy said? He said, my mother smoked cigarettes and
Hmm.
had patches. She's had this. He named all the things that his mother had gone through to keep her from smoking.
Hmm.
He said, she's a chained dog. One boy said, I don't get to see my father because
Oh.
it's in Indianapolis. He's like a chained dog because he's hooked on cocaine.
Hmm.
sometimes I feel like a chained dog. And then the grandmother, they would go and visit the grandmother. And so I had this girl to come in and she said, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. And all of a sudden I looked up, I was crying. The
Oh,
kids
wow.
were crying. What does it mean that I once was lost,
And
but
now I'm found.
found?
Mhm.
Because they were in the mountains of Kentucky.
Hmm.
The mama had to go down into the valley, but she was having babies all the time. She ended up having 10 babies with a man who could not read, who did not have a job. See, it's that kind of stuff, that human value that connects with literacy, that connects with STEM and causes kids to open up for literacy.
I see. Profound.
But you got to
Profound.
pick up the right kinds of books as
Right.
they're allowed, and you do that for 10 to 15 minutes every single day and stop and talk about things that opens their whole idea to the world and to the culture that they're in.
Yes.
And they find their identity within all of that. And in the mix of that, you're teaching skills.
Oh, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. So in terms of the follow-up policy, let's talk about policy. What policy changes will you recommend to better integrate literacy and STEM education, especially in schools serving marginalized communities?
Let me tell you, I was on an Indiana podcast a few weeks ago, and I was a part of a panel where we talked about retention.
Hmm.
And that's a big thing because there's some people who believe that third graders should be retained. They should not go on to fourth grade. They should be retained, and all these skills, the big five, I call them the big five that I just talked with you, the hierarchy or the big five. And Indiana has put retention at the bottom of their policy. They're doing all these other things that we've talked about, intervention, coaching, all these things before they get to retention. But if they move to retention, that means they've got to, if you have 95% of your kids who are not reading at grade level, look at all the staff that you got to hire in those grades. And that's just one school to move the kids. So that's a policy that many states are involved in. Right now, it's the science of reading, which is to change the instruction that is happening in schools. And that's what we've been talking about tonight. What do we need to put in place so that teachers are being effective? Because if they're not being effective in their teaching, kids are going to miss out on these skills that they really need.
And what defines effective to you will mean that integration of literacy, effective integration of illiteracy in STEM curriculum?
That has to be.
Okay.
That has to be it.
Okay.
That total integration has to be in there. Because if it's not there, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to still have more marginalized children who are not going to be able to go into STEM programs because they can't do the higher order thinking, because as they're reading, there are too many words they cannot decode and read quickly, that they get lost.
Yeah.
So that's the big thing. The vocabulary is too advanced for them, and so they can't get to the higher order thinking because they're too focused
They can't decode it.
They can't decode. So that's a major thing that is happening for them. So the policy is that the science of reading, nearly every state in the United States is putting the science of reading into their policy, saying that teachers need to be trained. There's a test that they have to take, but everything has to be research-based. They're teaching, but teachers have to be trained. So we're revamping professional development to have them. And I think I've talked about these different science of reading, but policy-wise, that's what they're putting into place. They're trying to put in the retention, but it's just one of, that's the lowest thing that they're trying to put in. Number two, they're putting in the science of reading, because teachers in the past have just been teaching pretty much, not all of us, but those of us who, I don't know what they were thinking, but they were just teaching whatever they thought they needed to teach, but not the science of
Yeah.
reading.
Yeah, I think that I think you may be right on that last point, especially as it pertains to STEM or STEM teachers. I think
Mhm.
their focus is more in regards to their own discipline,
Yes.
in most cases. And I think there is a need for concerted efforts now that we know that literacy, where it is reading and writing, is so important in
Mhm.
success as in the 21st century. I think there has to be a more concerted effort. Where I have actually seen a concerted effort, I would say it was when I was teaching middle school remember during when there was no child left behind, and every state have to make a certain proficiency.
Yes.
So I really literally see when I was teaching in middle school, the use of, even though right now even in my school, we're using data literally, but I think there is more scrutiny as it pertains to teachers, making sure, and there is more interaction between different departments. For example, the social study and the science, the
Mhm.
maths and the science, and we're all looking at the data from the benchmark and
Yes.
seeing where the students are struggling,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to reading and writing. And then we're making sure we're being deliberate in integrating those skill strategies within our curriculum, making sure that we're making sure that the students are moving from basic to proficient and advanced.
Exactly
So,
what I'm talking about tonight. That if you're
yes,
not doing that,
yes,
but some way you've got to see where the passions are for teachers, because
mhm,
doing this type of work means that you're going to have to make some changes. You've got to make changes.
yeah,
You can't keep doing the same old and you don't see good results. You must be able to help teachers see what is happening, and then they must have the heart for children to
mhm.
want to see them change. I've got one more story to tell you.
Yes,
So
sure.
in another school here in Texas many years ago, I observed a teacher, and she was talking about a dog. The dog was the main character.
Mm,
And she was just talking all over the place about this dog. And I'm sitting and looking, the kids were talking. Some of them were up and walking around the room. And so when she came in that afternoon for the feedback, the first thing I said, Miss Caldwell, that was her real name. I said, Miss Caldwell, I said, did you have a dog when you were growing up?
mm.
And all of a sudden she stopped and she started crying.
Oh
And
my.
I said, what did I say that was wrong? I said, did I say something that was wrong? She says, no, I had a dog when I was growing up and he died. And I said,
Mm,
tell me more about this dog. I said, do you have any pictures? And she pulled out a picture of this dog. And I said to her, I said, what were your kids doing when you were reading, getting ready to read the story and building background? She said they were up, walking around, talking. I said, why didn't you tell them your story?
mm.
And then she cried even more. And so
Wow.
next day she said, I'll do better. I'll do better tomorrow. That's what she told me. I'll do better tomorrow because I'd hit the consciousness of her. So the next day she came in, it was like a totally different class.
Mm,
She had the picture of
wow.
the dog there. Now in the Middle East, where I went into classrooms to observe the specialists from Qatar University, I had one teacher to tell me, she said, Dr. Lavert, she said, everything you're saying is true. She said, but we have supervisors. And if we're not following the curriculum guide, if we're not where they say we need to be, we're fired.
Mm,
So three-fourths of her kids, she was not reaching. But she was
wow.
going, and she knew that she was not reaching them. So the things that we're talking about today, there are teachers who have to have a commitment to the work. They have to have a commitment. I worked with another teacher, And I called her in and we talked about her work. And I said, you have this many kids. This is what happens. She said, I said, how many of them do you think you can move to proficiency? She said, Dr. Lavert, I can give you 90%.
Mhm.
Great. She said, I'm still working on those 10%. She said, I may not get them all the way there, but I'm going to get them there. She came in determined that she wanted to do the work. And let me tell you, at the end of the year, they were where she said that they would be. But she wasn't doing whole class instruction. She was differentiating the instruction. She was providing performance tasks. She was doing project-based learning is absolutely amazing because you find the things that the kids love and that becomes their project. And then you have the College for Knowledge table. They're coming back and you're working with them on their skills.
So that's what it takes in order to move the students up.
Yes.
Hmm.
Cannot have whole class. And that's what I see, that whole idea of one size fits all, because
Yeah.
it's not.
Hmm.
It does not work.
Thank you, Dr. Lavert. So in regards to, so for administrators, in terms of assessment and evaluation, how should school assess literacy within the context of STEAM education to ensure the improvement in reading and writing aligned with STEAM learning objective? Any ideas, any suggestions?
If they are taking like the NWEA, I don't know if you've not looked at it. I think you should look at it, or maybe one of your schools have it. But
Actually, we do use it quite because we try to pay attention to our special education students and also the students who English EL students.
Mhm.
So we do pay attention to that. Yes.
And you looked at the continuum? The continuum is
Go
like
ahead.
oh mine for NWEA, because then you have the ELA and then you have the math and you have the science and you have social studies.
Yes.
They're all so that under literacy they can hang their hats on all the other areas. So they can look at math and science and see how it connects with literacy. And then you have the inventory for each child to see where they are so that you can say, okay, so in science, we have cause and effect, we have inferencing, we have summarizing, we have the main idea. All that leads to critical thinking and analyzing. You move it into math, you move it into science. And then you go back to the foundational skills to see what are those foundational skills that's keeping them from being successful in those content areas.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So this is the last one, second of the last question.
Okay.
Technological literacy and digital divide.
Okay.
In an increasing digital world, how do technological literacy play into the broader conversation of literacy and STEAM? And how can we address the digital divide in this context?
Everything is that, right? That's not even anything to discuss because our kids are so into it. We can find kids who, and they fixed it now for kids who can't read, they can still find their way around in this technological world. They can still
Yes.
do it, but put words into it. That's where the problem comes in, because they cannot.
Okay.
And they don't have the stamina or the resilience. Even the test NWEA now and some of the other tests are done online. And some of our kids just become so weary. But if I put a cartoon AI, is it AI on there and cartoons and stuff like that? They can't. It's AI that turns everything that's real into something that is right. AI, is that AI that does that?
Well, it depends. And now AI can do that. You can use the AI to create different illustrations, right?
So
Right.
even I was in New York a few weeks ago,
Yes.
about a month or so ago, and I have a girlfriend who is an award-winning theater actress, And they were on strike because of that technology point of view. They wanted to pay them little money and use their images and
Right.
stuff. Okay, so easily do that kind of stuff without ever reading. Kids can. Unless a teacher is using that data, if the teacher is using the data and getting them up to par with literacy, more towards proficiency, I think it's a fabulous thing. They can develop all kinds of stuff and do all kinds of stuff. But that reading component, they still have to hang their hats on it.
So are you saying that the technology is important in closing the gaps? Is that what you're saying? And also, if technology is important in closing the gap, there is an access issue, equity issue.
Yes.
A marginalized community, they don't have the money and the access.
Yeah, but you can't put them on it. You
Okay.
can't put them on it on those early skills unless they understand it. Because if
Okay.
they need someone in front of them that can mediate them.
I'm glad you are, as an expert, you're saying that, because it's very important to emphasize to educators and to parents and the community that just handing your children at an early stage technology, that is not just because everybody has a different motivation for doing it. But if the motivation is maybe is the most convenient thing to do so that you can get stuff done, it's not you're not helping the child in the long run, because those basic foundational skills
They
are
need
definitely going to be missing. There's a need for one-on-one dedicated time between parents and the students, or I know parents and the children, or students and their students, making sure that they're mastering all these five basic skills that you've mentioned.
Now keep in mind, we are rewiring the brain.
There you go.
It's not there.
Yes.
And by hearing, they can see little cartoons and they're talking about mat and cat and rat and they're all these things. But if no one is there to provide systematic, explicit instructions why this is happening, they'll never get it.
You are right. So as we reach the end of this enlightening conversation, I want to ask you for a final question that could leave our listeners with lasting impression.
Okay.
From your extensive experience and insight into the nexus of literacy and STEAM, what is one key takeaway or message that you would like to leave with educators, policymakers, and parents about the importance of building strong literacy foundation for the success of their children and students in the STEAM field? Any comment, one last word on that?
But you know what? I think that literacy is the new civil rights. And I do believe that if we don't get it right, our kids won't ever forgive us and our parents won't ever forgive us. And their minds will never, ever be free. And I'll close with this one story. There was I met a guy and his brother had been in prison for something that he did. And he said, when his brother got out, he said, "Man, how did you make it in prison?" He said, "There were so many guys who could not read." He became the reader and the writer for them.
Wow.
He wrote to their parents, he wrote to girlfriends, he did all of that stuff for them. And that's how he was able to survive.
Wow.
And so with that in mind, no matter what course we're teaching, literacy hangs its hat on all of them, or they hang their hats on literacy. There's nothing that can be taught that literacy is the center, it's the core of all of it. And so we can divide it if we want to and say math doesn't have, yes, it does. Critical thinking, analyzing, processing. Science doesn't have too much in reading, but yes, you do. When you're reading, you need to understand what they're asking you to do and why it's important. So you're questioning, the QAR strategy is that you're asking questions that comes from the book And then you have to ask questions that comes from your mind. It's called the QR strategy. It's one of the powerful strategies. All of our third graders in our charter school made 100% on the state test. And that strategy and the one with the read aloud were the two most, the reciprocal teaching strategy and the QAR strategy were powerful strategies that we taught every single day. And then out of all of that, the last thing that we have to hang our hats on for literacy is humanity. All of this is about humanity, wanting the best for people, no matter what culture they're coming from. All of it is important. So you can't say, I'm not a reading teacher, because reading is in everything that we do. So we cannot, if our leaders are readers, then our children must become readers without a shadow of a doubt.
That is a very good advice and recommendation. And I love it. I just want to thank you, Dr. Lavert, for taking your precious time and talking to us about the importance of literacy in STEAM. And definitely with everything that we've talked about, now I am hoping that our listeners can really see the importance of the A in the STEM, the A in the STEAM. So she'll never be just STEM, STEM. It should be STEAM. Because what are we going to do without literacy, whether it is in reading or writing, or without humanity? We need that in there. So as we wrap up today, enlightening conversation from ABC to PhD, building strong foundation in literacy, it is clear that literacy journey is both challenging and rewarding. We have explored the vital role of literacy in STEAM education. We have discussed the innovative strategies, overcoming barriers, and envision future where every student has the opportunity to thrive. Our discussion today with Dr. Lavert, an esteemed guest, has underscored the crucial message: literacy is not just about reading and writing. It is about opening doors to understanding, empowering critical thinking, and enabling our students to navigate and excel in a complex STEAM-driven world. As educators, parents, policymakers, and lifelong learners, we are collectively responsible for fostering an environment where literacy can flourish. From the earliest ABCs to the complexity of PhD, each step in educational journey is pivotal. It is about building not just a foundation of word, but a foundation for life. I want to thank our special guest, Dr. Gwendolyn Lavert, for her invaluable insight, and thank you, you listeners, for joining us on this journey. Let us continue to advocate for and invest in our children and their literacy. Because when we strengthen our literacy, we don't just build better learners, we build brighter and more innovative future for all. I am Dr. Olufade from STEAM Spot, reminding you that every word counts in a quest for knowledge and innovation. But before I say the next time, let's see you next time, I would like to remind you all, I have written 2 books, 2 children's books, and I usually don't put a plug in for myself, but I have to do it since we're in the spirit of literacy. And also Dr. Lavert has written several books. So there you go. So she has written Papa's Mark, right? That is one. I think you've written 5 books, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Lavert.
I have about 17 in all, but this
17. Wow.
2 books that are new. I have Papa's Mark and The Barber's Cutting Edge for this year.
Oh my goodness. That is phenomenal. That is really phenomenal. Hopefully I'm happy that I've written two, but hopefully someday I'll be able to write many more. So my latest one, Dr. Lavert, is Adana's Magical Pearls. So this is about a young girl. I want to remind everyone that Africa also have a Cinderella story, right? So this is like a Cinderella story. So this is a young lady who lost her mother and her father remarried. So now she's fortunate to have a stepmother and stepsisters, but they were not nice to her. So I guess the purpose of the story is it's all about values, to try to teach our children the importance of love and shying away from jealousy, and also encouraging young people that your dream is your dream, that you are destined to do wonderful things. The second, of course, the first book that I wrote, I don't know if you can see it or not, but it is called, Have You Ever Wondered How the Turtle Got Its Cracked Shell?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And this book is about legacy. So a long time ago, the turtle used to have a smooth shell, but because of his mischievous behavior, he ended up having a cracked shell. And now, for many generations that came after the first turtle, every turtle now has a cracked shell. I wrote this book, it's an adaptation of folk tales or stories I used to hear as a child growing up. These stories taught us values and things that are important within our community back in Africa. So my hope is that parents can read this book. It is very interactive. There are a lot of questions in the back at the end of the book so that parents can engage their children with. So buy this book, support my effort. 10% of anything that I make from this will go to a STEAM initiative. So this is another way in which I am trying to support my STEAM initiative, whether here in Africa or whether here in the United States or the Caribbean. So without having to beg for money from somewhere. Thank you so much, Dr. Lavert. Do you want to share the last word before we say good night?
Books, I just want you to see, this is my bestseller. It's called The Barber's Cutting Edge. And so it's a
Oh,
bestseller.
nice.
Papa's Mark is the one that is a Coretta Scott King winner.
Oh,
And
nice.
I have these chapter books. There are 10 of them with McGraw-Hill. Off
Nice.
School was a on the Smithsonian's Children's Honor list. And then The Music in Derek's Heart is a Reading Rainbow book.
Oh,
So
nice.
that I have here, but I just thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I thank LinkedIn for putting this all together because it has broadened my horizon. So thank you very
Me
much.
too.
It has been absolutely amazing for me. So
Uh,
thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Lavert, for coming on to STEAM Spark, Think STEAM Career Podcast. So this has been Dr. Olufade, or Dr. O, from STEAM Spark, reminding you that every word counts in the quest for knowledge and innovation. Until next time, keep reading, keep learning, and keep growing. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.